Right now, people say we are in the golden age of indie animation, and while we are in an amazing era for sure, I really hope that this isn't the golden age, because I think indie animation could go so much further. I'm hoping one day we'll look back at this as our Bronze Age or Industrial Age or any other age that just means we're still working our way up, with a golden age that's yet to come and a renaissance coming shortly after. But let me explain why we're not there, which is specifically I think that there isn't a realistic system for more long-term projects to develop. Right now, indie animation is dominated, I would say, by two key studios: VivziePop's Spindlehorse, which produces Helluva Boss and Has-Been Hotel, and Glitch Productions, known for Meta Runners, Murder Drones, The Amazing Digital Circus, and as I write this, the upcoming series, The Gaslight District. With Spindlehorse dominating 2D and Glitch dominating 3D, it makes sense why people feel like this is the golden age of animation, because this is some golden content, and they certainly are the largest and most consistent indie animated productions that we've seen so far. Right now, both studios are going into a bit of a hiatus, with Helluva Boss just finishing season 2, and while Glitch released 2 episodes of The Amazing Digital Circus just a couple months apart, those episodes were produced simultaneously, and the next batch of episodes hasn't even begun animation yet. Even with these gaps, however, the two still managed to put out content pretty regularly compared to most other projects. It's certainly not as often as networks that can release weekly, or especially streaming services which can drop all of their episodes on a single day, but they've both also managed to embrace certain storytelling styles that benefit from a gap between episodes. Stories that may not feel as strong in a weekly release format, but when a month or even more apart, creating worlds that people can explore as much in their minds as on screen, with the implications of the individual lore. These are amazing projects with quality that often goes beyond their mainstream counterparts, and budgets going into the hundreds of thousands of dollars reportedly. But if this was the golden age of indie animation, I think we'd find a lot more success beyond these two studios. And for the record, there are other indie animated shows that are going a great distance beyond just Helluva Boss and Glitch's 3D animated series. But right now, they're the most well-known examples that have managed to develop a similar system of funding, both relying mostly on their merchandise sales that puts the money right back into the show, though they do have other options as we will also explore. Since Helluva Boss and Glitch's shows have taken off, a lot of people have gotten in their heads that they could make their own shows as well, with even more new indie animated pilots and full-fledged series popping up right here on YouTube after their releases. And for those who don't know, I'm also talking about myself. I've always loved animation and working with animated projects, so at some point I put together a 7-minute indie anime pilot called the Magical Girl Garnet Heart Show, which starred a Sailor Venus type character who is turning 30 and likes to get drunk at work. Her sidekick is a magical girl with a nerdy maid theme. She has a cool talking cat voiced by sarcastic chorus who can turn into a giant monster, and in the pilot we had her fight against a Homura Akemi ripoff. It took about $20,000 to produce, which was a bit more than I would need to spend on other episodes because there was a lot of early draft work as we were starting to figure out how to make the show. But that should give you a pretty decent idea of the amount of money people can spend on certain styles of animation, and ours is considered relatively low budget. Our pilot was animated primarily by Aldo, who many of you have seen in the background here in our videos as the animator who actually draws these characters of us hanging out in this office. And we used an early 90s anime animation format in order to save most of our money by having the characters standing around talking for a large majority of the scenes. This allowed us to pour a lot more of that money into the action sequences where we get really cool fight scenes set to Japanese music. Like a lot of people, I went into my project knowing that it probably wouldn't take off, but wanting to tell a story that was very distinctly for me, and to see if the world was open to that. And while I feel like most projects could find some sort of audience if put in the right place at the right time, Garnet Heart just didn't take off in a way that made it feasible for me to produce more episodes, and that's unfortunately a pattern we'll see with a lot of the indie animated shows that we'll be talking about today. There are projects that have gone quite the distance, of course. For instance, if you guys haven't seen God School, this show has released 9 episodes over the last 5 years. And unlike Helluva Boss and the shows of Glitch Productions, which have relatively large production teams, God School is animated entirely by its creator, Gaylord Libzart. This show follows the Greek gods in a high school setting, having the characters being teenagers before the time they were said to rise to power after overthrowing the Titans. It isn't just a cartoon about Greek mythology, but rather it has a strong focus on the gods relevant to the story of the Trojan War, which was said to be caused by a quarrel among the goddesses. It's a brilliant adaptation of Greek mythology with a tone that sort of crosses Mean Girls with a colorful animated format. And the fact that it's produced by just one person is perhaps part of the reason why God School has made it as far as it has. While its 9 episodes may not be as many as Glitch's multiple series and Helluva Boss's multiple seasons over the years, about 2 episodes a year for God School is certainly among the most consistent for projects of this scope. With Helluva Boss and Glitch's productions, the larger budgets help cover larger crews, but if a show is designed to be simple enough that one person can animate it in a timely fashion, then your budget is essentially just the budget for one person to live. If you can pay an animator an annual salary to live comfortably, most could create some sort of episodic project where they produce an ongoing narrative. With God School, this comes down to using vector animation, which involves puppeting characters similar to 3D animation, making different two-dimensional parts move on screen instead of drawing them frame by frame. Gaylord also makes beautiful use of simplistic but artistic backgrounds, which is a must in a fast-paced animation project. Even professional shows on Cartoon Network will lean into a simple art style, as it's not about detail but arrangement that makes something beautiful. The greatest example I can think of being Steven Universe, which had this almost minimalist style to the background, especially with the skies, but that which when decorated with clouds and colors and gradients led to very beautiful scenes. In a similar way, God School is able to make a lot of beautiful backgrounds, focusing largely on locations that are Olympic pillars and heavenly clouds. Elements that can be cleverly arranged to look nice while being technically very simple to draw or generate, at least compared to more detailed backgrounds of landscapes. With all of this in mind, Gaylord has been able to produce the show so far with funding from the French government, as well as Patreon support. And as long as that money is enough for one person like Gaylord to support himself, he can keep making this show and perhaps more to come. From what I understand, Glitch itself also started out this way, with a lot of funding coming from the Australian government in order to promote more Australian-based productions. But whereas Glitch would start focusing on merchandise sales in order to help fund their shows, the viewership of the God School episodes have ultimately declined over the years, especially with the more recent episodes. While viewership can decline over time for just about any show, even Helluva Boss, they've managed to maintain very strong support through merchandise sales, with their different merchandise drops only getting bigger and more elaborate each year. But I unfortunately don't see that same pattern happening with God School so far. The point is, while God School still gets a lot of views, that doesn't mean the fan base has the same ferocity, even if compared to others of equal size. And that's okay. Not every show is supposed to have a very obsessive fan base to it to make it work. It isn't even just that God School or other cartoons like it are particularly niche, but even with millions of views, some shows just don't attract an obsessive fan base. Some shows are a beautiful classic violin piece that everyone knows about, but not something that everyone buys on CD. For me, I just want to see more episodes, and not just because I want to audition for the role of Prometheus if he's ever written into the show, but because it's an example of indie animation at its rawest. It's one person sitting down and telling the story they want to tell from start to finish. I feel like if this project and maybe others had a public plan of the number of episodes intended to be produced, as well as the seeming wait times between episodes with this scope of production, they could get a lot more people interested in it as a focused fandom. Of course, part of the fun of being an indie animated show is that you can have more of a rough plan and figure things out as you go and as your budget allows, but for a lot of these shows, I feel like the key to keeping more people around might just be making it clear what their plan is, setting expectations, and sharing more of the insides of their production so everyone can feel like they're part of the team too. Now, one show that's been a lot more open about their production insides from what I've seen is Monkey Wrench, another animated series right here on YouTube. Monkey Wrench is a very quality production, with half-hour-long episodes focusing on 2 dudes doing mercenary jobs out in space, competing with other fun aliens. I did a whole video on this show and its lore, which has gone to interesting places in just 4 episodes. Already a very decent number of episodes for an indie animated show to get at, especially one of this quality and size. However, there's fears that the show won't make it to episode 5. At the end of episode 4, the team showed us a breakdown of the budget for the episode, which included music, voice acting, and sound design, but also a percentage for animation that was not done by the creator of the show himself, Joshua Palmer. You'll notice that despite making up most of the cost of the episode, he notes that this was for less than 10 minutes of the animation, with the rest of the animation and all of the backgrounds being done by Joshua himself. This information was included as part of a call to action to get more people to donate to the show or else buy some of the merch available, such as plushes. Though these can bring in very little in actual money, even with a lot of sales, mostly due to outsourcing production to a safe, streamlined system. This was $34,000 for animation alone, with the total cost of the episode being $56,000, with this still requiring the artist to animate 70% of the project himself and all of its backgrounds. This doesn't surprise me considering the budget of my own animated pilot that we discussed before, which is $20,000, which I believe for the most part still used an art style that was a lot more low budget than Joshua Palmer's. After doing this kind of work and spending this kind of money for the first 4 episodes, even with a little bit of help from fans, the creator has acknowledged that it's just too much work to put in for a show that doesn't get enough support to actually fund itself, even if the episodes do go on to get millions and millions of views. It's normal to spend a lot of time and even a lot of money chasing your personal art projects, but with animation, unless you're a one-man studio powerhouse, you have to spend crazy amounts of money just to get out a single product, way more than compared to arts like painting or even just drawing and producing your own webcomic. It's a shame because if picked up by a studio, it feels like Monkey Wrench could be a fairly successful multi-season show, but the world just doesn't pick up every good money-making idea in the right format, which is a shame because it feels like Monkey Wrench could go right on Netflix as a full season drop where you get all the episodes at once and get to binge watch the entire show. I've heard from other videos on Monkey Wrench that there's been consideration to do future episodes in more of an animatic or webcomic format to finish the story, with full animation in the dream scenes that Joshua wants to see done, and frankly, I'd be really into that. But as of now, the project is so large in scale that even with a fairly big audience starting out, there's no guarantee that we'll get the full story, especially in this fully animated format. Now, from what I understand, Joshua already had a successful channel, but this was more of a large-scale TV quality endeavor of his, and maybe part of the problem was that even with his existing popularity, he didn't have the right approach to building the project's fan base upward. This can be very difficult, and with my own project, I just put out the final pilot with very little build-up, hoping more so that it being a weird original anime with fight scenes would help it get around. But what worked more so for the big shows like Has Been Hotel was that its creator Visipop really built the fan base upwards before the pilot even aired. It wasn't just some amazing pilot that showed up one day that we all got attached to, but she already had a really rabid fan base for the show that grew out of the fandom for her earlier webcomic, Zoophobia. Another project that seemed to build up this way was Ramshackle, which released its own animated pilot to great success in 2024. The pilot focused on 3 orphans named Vinny, Stone, and Skip as they try to hustle up money to get a little food and survive, which often leads to them just trying to scam the townsfolk. This is a much smaller scale story focused more so on classic cartoon comedy antics. By slowly releasing an entire issue as little pages, a fanbase slowly built up that led to the pilot getting funded, and I hope that more episodes are coming. But either way, Ramshackle is a great example of how even if you want to do a full animated series, you can build your way upwards from a comic and live streams first. But the problem with all of this is that it still relies on the idea of superfans, something that even with this approach can be hard to attain without the right characters. You can see different projects trying this approach to different results as well. One of my favorites is a little project called Downtown Felines, who only has a teaser out so far, and I try to avoid talking too much about teasers and previews because until an actual episode airs, we don't actually know if anything is really coming. But there is something extra special about this project. This show has a crazy weird setup, not just about cats living in a city, but our main cats here are living in a special quarantine zone of sorts where none of the cats are allowed to leave. Despite this, the vibe is rather magical, with the characters focusing a lot on their emotions and finding love based on the teaser. And with just this short preview, it's already delivered so much more than a lot of projects manage to even with a full episode. It's a tiny project with a simple style, but that simple style allows them to save time in having very elaborate scenes with the cats running around downtown. And though it only has 27,000 views so far, I think its simple style combined with the artist's cool full motion sequences can make it an easy show to build up a huge following over time. On the flip side, we have projects like Talon, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, if not from my videos, then from the epic teasers and trailers that they have put out over the years. Talon is a very exciting idea, a story about dinosaurs mastering elements like a Jurassic version of Avatar: The Last Airbender, all while fighting off aliens who wish to wipe them out and use their planet for their their own reasons. This is an epic idea with studio quality animation that is consistent with its great motion. And while the teasers can get a lot of views, so far the project hasn't taken off from what I can see. It's managed to do some good numbers with the teasers and such, and the Patreon does have 73 members so far. But that doesn't seem like it's enough to cover the really high budget that the pilot alone is said to have. Talon launched similarly to my Garnet Heart, putting a lot of the money right into an upfront product with the hopes that people would just want to see more of it. But unfortunately, even if it's cool, it doesn't mean people will donate to make it happen. People are used to receiving television for free or close to free, and donating a lot of money just for one pilot is a big ask. It's unfortunate because Talon just has something fascinating about it. It feels mainstream and indie at the same time, not just because of its professional style, but because of the way it takes what worked for children's adventure television in the Avatar era and how it just added dinosaurs to it. But for now, I'm not sure where this project will go either. To me, I think one of the best approaches I've seen is from a show called The Earth Guy, another project done entirely by a single animator from start to finish, Aninimated. This indie animated show uses similar low-budget anime techniques like the ones I used in my Garnet Heart project, focusing more so on what the characters are saying and less on trying to make them have some sort of fluid motion. There is still motion and action, but even these tend to use classic anime tricks to convey the action, as opposed to fluid frame-by-frame Sakuga animation such as we see in my pilot when the characters are fighting. The format for Earth Guy allows more so for a focus on the characters and their vivid personalities, with each episode being more fun when it focuses on us learning about the crazy aliens and what life is like on each of their home planets, before eventually coming to this awesome boarding school in space to meet each other. Aninimated is a talented artist for anyone who has looked at her actual art, but due to the fast-paced production, people can be a bit insulting to their animated work, even though it's a genius execution of a low budget that takes what people like about anime and childhood cartoons about school and gives the audience exactly what they want. Each of these characters feels less like a trope or stereotype and more like a perfected archetype that immediately gives you insight into the nature of their species and their unique role within it. Episode 4 has become the shining example of how fun this project can be, with a special school fair scene where each alien student gets to tell us all about their homeworld. And in the holiday special, we get even more of this, with each character telling us about their holiday tradition. This ended with a sequence that was nothing but stills of the characters enjoying the holidays, but it resonated so much more than a lot of high production shows' greatest moments. And this wasn't even an actual episode. From here, I hope the show continues, but the views have been decreasing since the pilot, which is a shame because artists just keep getting better and better as they go along, and Aninimated is no exception. In the past, people would wait multiple episodes before deciding if they really liked a show, but now so much of it comes down to whether or not a person likes the show based off of the first episode. But with The Earth Guy, what you get is someone's unfiltered ideas of what childhood animation and anime as a whole was meant to be, or rather what anime could have been if it wasn't being weighed down by corporate interests, the desire to draw things out and to make everything some sort of endless arc where we never actually learn anything about our characters or see their lives develop. Another smaller project I found I love while making this video is the new series Indigo from Kuiper Moon. This series uses less motion than your typical animated series, being almost in an animatic format, but with beautiful hand-drawn stylization tied together with a perfect color scheme. The story is told in what I would call a lo-fi format, using beautiful old-school video game sounding beats, and instead of voices for the characters, special notes play when they talk and you read the subtitles. This makes extra sense in the world where all of the characters are different species and speak different languages, it would seem. This is the kind of show you kind of expect to see randomly appearing at 2 AM on Adult Swim, or on some obscure website where you have to have some sort of special password in order to get to the next episode. And with this smaller scale production, Kuiper Moon has been able to produce episode 1 in just 6 weeks and episode 2 just a few months after that as a spare time project. The story itself is rather epic in its craziness, but I'm not gonna lie, you don't actually need to know what the story is in order to enjoy it. You can watch it multiple times and it feels like a stylized music video where you're slowly getting the intents more than the actual story. Though that is there and you can read even more about it in the description. It's a very simple setup, but to me, indie animation should be more about projects and artists like this. People who have the the ambition to do what they need to on their own, because if they can get supported enough to make 4 episodes a year even, that's a pretty good system as far as most indie shows go. To be able to do, say, a season every 2 years of 8 episodes each would be amazing with the right episodic but overarching formula. And there's so many artists like Anina Mated and Kuiper Moon that I think would create amazing shows that could be loved for years to come if given the right spotlight. And some artists could be supported for comparatively little, depending on where in the world they live. But I get that not every project can be this kind of one-person production, with a focus more on doing things as fast as possible instead of the cinematics. The greatest example I can think of with this would be The Art of Murder, which perhaps captures what indie animation is about. This show isn't afraid to use cost-cutting techniques, but it's to the degree that they are able to pull off what feels like large-scale musical numbers on an indie animation budget. The Art of Murder is about a fan artist for different types of fandoms like anime and video games and even American cartoons, whose drawings come to life every night when she goes to sleep. The show introduced us to a Disney princess, an emo Naruto ninja, and a gender-bent Adventure Time character, and then showed us these characters hanging out in the cozy bedroom of a fandom nerd. The thought that goes into every single shot in this pilot cannot be emphasized enough, with each one having such a unique angle and depth of field. It's a production with a pretty small team, all things considered, but one that can't afford to cut corners without sacrificing one of its elements that makes it feel so necessary. From the amount of motion, to the music, to the beautiful lighting and foreground effects. But how do you fund this project long term? How far does it intend to go, and how do you keep people interested in that for however long it takes to pull this off? With this show in particular, I don't know how it's doing on funding, and even with millions of views, that may not cover the cost of a full second episode, let alone prepare the team for a full series. And these are just the big ones that I like so much that I made a dedicated video about or created a section for here. There's a whole bunch of others that I actually have a lot of notes on that I want to address in their own videos. But today's video ended up becoming a lot more about the indie animation budget problem and how each of these different shows have tried to tackle it so far. Now, each of these shows could survive in different places. Some could be picked up by Netflix as a legit series and probably find more fans than on YouTube. Other shows only seem to thrive because they are on a free platform like YouTube, and that's where everyone can find them. I want to believe that somehow there is a way to create an indie animation streaming service that focuses more so on projects like these. Something like Netflix, but instead of having an entire season drop 1 day a year or even 2 days a year, creating projects that focus more so on getting episodes out a few times a year for smaller crews, and maybe even up to once a month for larger scale productions. I feel like shows like Helluva Boss have proven that having an episodic release with a very big theme for each episode a month apart will almost feel like too much content with the right mindset towards writing. Has Been Hotel, on the other hand, seems to be written more so for a binge watching experience, all the episodes back to back. So there's no reason that there couldn't be an indie animated streaming service that focuses on producing things episode by episode and releasing them that way. If I won the lottery and got millions of dollars, I like to fantasize that I'd take artists like Anina Mated or Gaylord Libzar and just fund them with an annual salary to produce as much of their shows as possible, and even try to take on larger scale shows that require more of a crew. It would be so cool to see these shows on a platform that gives each episode special attention instead of entire arcs all at once, or even just a new episode each week. A place where longer term stories are encouraged with a focus on artfulness. It would be hard to monetize this, as so much of what makes people come to these projects is that they are free, but maybe with early access to certain shows and insight into the creators and production process, a larger scale streaming service like this could take off, beyond the attempts we've seen at other places like Frederator. Like with any platform that takes money, your products have to appeal to people as a whole, and it's hard to grow that out while also having the content be free to a large degree. Right now, the places that should be trying to do more things like this should be Cartoon Network or even Disney. But Disney mostly focuses on its internal content and IPs, and Cartoon Network has tried so hard over the years to get away from being an animation network to focus on just making content for kids. Until we find some sort of solution, I don't think we're in the golden age of indie animation thus. Not just because my own project didn't get the funding I wanted, don't get me wrong, but because there's so many shows that I would like to see take off and go further that are still just struggling to get by. I hope one day we'll move beyond what I see as this bronze or silver age, and one day we'll be in a place where everything is golden, where there's so many different artists who are able to take off and make their own projects just for people to enjoy, without it personally costing them all of their time and money without any return. But what do you guys think? This video focused more so on the different indie animated projects and their budgets as opposed to what to look out for in this coming year, and I'll be doing another video at some point talking about other series I found along the way that I'd really like to talk about. For now, check out the playlist I put together of all these different indie animated projects that you can watch for yourself, as well as the playlist I made of all of our previous videos talking about these different indie animated shows. And if you really want to talk about indie animation, join us in the Cartoon Universe Discord server. Link in the description down below, and I'll see you guys there.
It is I, Dr. Cyborg, and I have come to steal the treasure you care about most!
Not the magic crystal!
No! Racer, help me! Good luck trying to get your little boyfriend back! No! Not my boyfriend! Boyfriend? Wait, what did I say?